I've got to say the Prime Minister was right today. Voters do now have a choice. It's between the divided Liberals, with a new record low in the polls today, and all over the shop over global warming policy. Or, on the other hand, a Labor government absolutely united behind a target of slashing our emissions to net zero by 2050.
They've got this blancmange, this mess. My government has one policy.
Now, Albanese obviously thinks that's an obvious choice, and is wrong. Because I put the choice like this. On the one hand, you have the divided Liberals struggling to ditch, yes, a disastrous policy that will ruin Australia. And on the other, you have a Labor government absolutely determined to give it to us, good and hard, and they're united behind wanting to do that. That's frightening. Now, it's true that the Liberals, yes, they are in a mess and facing massive attacks, including hysterical ones from the ABC, I'll show you that later, for deciding to ditch the net zero target. And let's start with that side of the issue before we look at something Labor's Penny Wong said yesterday that explains everything about why it still is Labor, not the Liberals, who are the greatest danger to our future. Now today, a new Redbridge poll confirmed everything a news poll said 2 weeks ago. The Liberals down to a new record low, humiliating, of just 24% of the vote. And you look at One Nation, up so much to a record 18%. That's twice the Greens' support. And at a level now rivaling the Coalition. Now, the key problem for the Liberals seems to be not that it's ditching net zero, much as many on the left will want that to believe that, because the voters that it's lost seem to have switched directly to One Nation, which is even harder on net zero and mass immigration as well. Now, the Liberals' Achilles heel is obviously the division and the voters turning right off Opposition Leader Susan Ley, who's a nice woman, but unfortunately has no cut-through or authority. I mean, she struggled today to even drive in a screw properly, which sort of like was symbolic. And meanwhile, the papers, of course, are full of talk that of some of her left-wing supporters in the Liberals switching to the very conservative Andrew Hastie instead as the new leader. Now, Hastie, of course, being the SAS captain, look, he still lacks polish, still hasn't proved he can argue fluently on economics, for instance, all without snapping at reporters, but at least he's a fresh face. Now, this report about the move to Hastie, it was so damaging that two other Liberal left-wingers who support, that's the faction that supports Ley, Anne Ruston and Maria Kovacic, issued a press release both claiming the report was wrong, but unfortunately at the same time confirming it by saying Ley's faction strongly supported her leadership, only to qualify it by saying, well, a majority of a faction at least. So that's all a mess. And it's going to stay a mess, I'm afraid, for a long while. Until, of course, Hastie or the other Conservative challenger, Angus Taylor, who was out there on the weekend promoting himself, unless one of them ends Ley's misery with a challenge, which I don't think they'll want to do for a little while because, you know, they're blokes and it's probably safer to let the Liberals' first woman leader fail under her own steam without some man cutting her down before her time. But that wasn't Ley's only problem today. Meanwhile, the ABC yet again showed its almost hysterical bias against anyone threatening its global warming faith. Here is Sabra Lane, presenter of ABC Radio's marquee AM program, this morning, again implying, and falsely in my opinion, that little Australia could change the temperature of the whole world. And here, well, yeah, really, change the temperature in some meaningful way, seriously, and that Australians 25 years from now will be stunned by what these Liberals have just done by saying no to net zero.
Your message to future generations who may look back in 2050 and think, what on earth happened?
And then Ley started heckling, or Lane started heckling Ley. Can you believe it? I mean, to listen to Sabra Lane, it sounded really like an ABC climate zealot, frightened that voters might actually now back the Liberals ditching the net zero madness. Listen to this aggression.
CSIRO GenCost found that renewables remain the lowest cost new build electricity generation technology in Australia.
Well, if that's the case, Sabra, why has the price gone up 40%? Because what people may misunderstand is that...
But you're airbrushing out things like to the Ukraine war and hangover from COVID?
We've moved well past that. And the point I want to make is that renewables have their place.
Those things pushed up inflation.
Now, just the fact check here, that ABC presenter pushing the GenCost report as a Bible is relying in fact on a highly controversial report criticised for its global warming spin and cherry picking. And then she went on to parrot the Labor spin, oh no, it's the Ukraine war that's responsible for our higher power prices, when in fact the gas prices, which did shoot up at the start of the Ukraine war, have long since fallen back to near normal. And what's more, the nation's top electricity and gas suppliers just today admitted in a joint report that years of higher power prices are now locked in under Labor and its net zero policies. They said most CEOs expect energy prices to rise in the coming years as investment spending on new generation infrastructure increases sharply, talking particularly about new transmission and network costs, because of course, as you know, all those new wind and solar farms actually need very expensive wires strung out all over the country to hook them all up to the grid. Plus the backup, of course. And then when you add all that, the Prime Minister's claim today looks more and more dishonest.
Australians know the cheapest form of new energy is renewables.
Yeah, if all this new wind and solar are the cheapest, why have your bills instead gone up? So for all the chaos on the Liberal side, as they change policies, challenge the global warming cult, Labor still is the greater danger. And even more so because it is united in doing the wrong thing. I mentioned Penny Wong, something the Foreign Minister said on the ABC yesterday. I tell you what, it says so much about why Labor is the danger, why it has given us this disaster. She was asked on the ABC about the government's push to host next year's massive United Nations Global Warming Summit, to hold it in Adelaide, even though the government's own costings warn that could cost us $2 billion. $2 billion for a talk fest. But listen to Wong's response yesterday.
Obviously, South Australia wants to host COP, your hometown, but is it true the cost is more than $2 billion?
I'm not going to comment on the costs of a conference that we haven't won the bid for yet.
I mean, that is just stunning. Here is Wong saying, I will first get this conference and only then will we tell you what it will cost. I mean, that's exactly the wrong way round. Under normal business practices, that is. But that is exactly Labor's position all the time with its net zero global warming policies. It has never once told you first what they will all cost, or even what difference they will make to the climate. I mean, has the government told you the cost of net zero or the benefit? And you're supposed to say, yeah, okay, spend whatever it takes. Who cares if it costs trillions to make, about little or no difference at all, overall to the climate? Now, if you think, oh, no, it can't be so, because Penny Wong, she speaks so reasonably and calmly, factually. Maybe we should trust her. And I say, remember her form? She was our first climate change minister under Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard, when she told you all sorts of things that turned out false. Like, Labor, don't worry, they're not going to give you a carbon tax.
We know that you can't have any environmental certainty with a carbon tax.
Wong also told you, as climate change minister, global warming, that's going to destroy the Great Barrier Reef. When in fact official studies suggest coral cover is now above average. And Wong also said rainfall, Southern Australia, that'll be cut by a quarter by 2050. 70 years after she said that, well, actually, we still see rainfall in southern Australia at or above the levels of the first half of last century, before we then got a couple of decades of good rain, and now it seems back to what appears to be normal. And now look at what Labor has done to us to stop the global warming that hasn't actually delivered the disasters, all of the disasters Wong predicted. Billions on green hydrogen schemes that have failed or frozen. Plans for massive new offshore wind farms, that have been scrapped. Power prices soaring, smelters and heavy industry driven out of business, or needing such big taxpayer handouts that the Tomago smelter owners said on the weekend, even $1 billion of government handouts, relief, a rescue package, that's not going to be enough. And taxpayers now look like having to subsidise the electricity too. So this is Labor's net zero disaster. And if you tell me, but the Liberals, they're not united, I say at least the party is changing its mind, challenging this nonsense. It was never going to be easy to make such a U-turn. It was always going to take time to work out a totally new policy with all the details. Of course, there was going to be some disagreement and lack of unity in making such a change. But at least we do now have a choice. On the one side, some hope at last for change. And on the Labor side, more of the insane same.